5th Fighter Wing traces its humble beginnings in 1947 when the U.S. government turned over Basa Air Base, then known as Florida Blanca Airfield, to the Philippine government. However, to know its existence is to learn the genesis of Basa Air Base. 1938, the U.S. Army Air Corps built a small airstrip in Florida Blanca, Pampanga, named as Del Carmen Airfield, until 1941, when it was renamed to Florida Blanca Airfield. 1942, it was World War II. The U.S. and the Philippine military forces was of no match to the new superpower, the Empire of Japan. Japanese forces occupied Florida Blanca and immediately converted the airfield into one of their auxiliary air camps. At the peak of the war, the U.S. Army Air Corps regained the airfield to accommodate the multi-engine bombers and single-engine Avengers that the Americans employed to decisively defeat the already crumbling Japanese forces in the Asia-Pacific region. On August 22, 1947, the airfield was turned over to the Philippines with the initial complement of personnel coming from the 2nd Fighter Squadron and soon joined by their comrades. Later, Florida Blanca Airfield was rechristened to Basa Airfield to give honor to Lieutenant Cesar Fernando T. Basa, the first Filipino fighter pilot who gallantly fought and went down during a hellish dogfight against the superior Japanese Zero fighter. And in 1950, Basa Airfield was leveled up to Basa Air Base, for it is herefore known that best fighter pilots will be knighted. Weeks passed, and the deactivation of the 1st and 2nd Fighter Squadrons took place. However, this gave birth to the 6th and 7th Fighter Squadron. October 24, 1947, the dust of war finally settled, and a composite group was organized. The designated commander was Major Benito Ebuen. His mission, to coordinate the activities of the 2 fighter squadrons. This was then the founding of the 5th Fighter Group. A year later, it was 1948. The 5th Fighter Group, together with other units, launched a simultaneous full-scale military offensive against the Hukbong Bayan Laban sa Hapon or Hukbalahap insurgents in Central Luzon and the newly found Moro rebels formed by Haji Camlon in Mindanao. Amidst the fury of the campaign against insurgency, 8th Fighter Squadron was organized in 1951, with vital roles in operational training and tactical readiness. Later, in September of 1952, the 5th Fighter Group was spawned, the structural seed of what eventually became one of the 4 major units of the Philippine Air Force, the 5th Fighter Wing. In one clear sunny day of 1955, several T-33s, the first jet trainer aircraft, roared in the Philippine skies and touched down at the fighter base. 2 years later, the F-86F Sabre jets that formed the backbone of the Philippine Air Force air defense finally arrived and elevated our status as one of Asia's top fighters. Before that decade ended, in 1959, the 5th Fighter Wing showed their mettle as they fielded the country's very first Filipino weapons team and won top awards during the Flying Brothers Fighter Weapons Meet in Clark, Pampanga. Soon, the United Nations acknowledged our fighters' competence when the Limbas Squadron joined the UN peacekeeping forces to the troubled country of Congo, Africa in 1963. This merited them the United Nations Service Medal for putting their lives on the line. This later followed naming the squadron as the 9th Tactical Fighter Squadron. It is now 1965. The Philippine Air Force finally entered into the supersonic jet age. The 5th Fighter Wing acquired the versatile twin-engine fighter jets known as the F-5 Freedom Fighter aircraft, capable of delivering heavy bombs, rockets, rapid projectiles on ground targets. This set the 5th Fighter Wing as the forefront of air defense, responsible for air reconnaissance, interdiction, and ground support. The F-5 Freedom Fighter's quality of hardware was epitomized by the superb flying skills of the fighter pilots of the Blue Diamonds that was earlier formed in 1953. This premier aerial Blue Diamonds team blazed the Philippine skies as a precision aerobatic demonstration team that displayed the capability of the aircraft as well as the skills and fearlessness of the fighter pilots. 1972, the declaration of martial law. 2 months after it took effect, the 5th Fighter Wing deployed its F-5 and F-86 aircraft to Mactan for a massive air assault in Cibalo Hill, Sulu, to extricate the Marines in the area. This was considered as the biggest single air operation against the secessionists. 5th Fighter Wing nests at Basa Air Base, eminently transitioned to jet aircraft operations, amplified its role of air defense, and gradually advanced into a modern fighter base equipped with runway, lighting, refueling facilities, and other vital installations. June 12, 1991, Mount Pinatubo happened. The base unconditionally surrendered to the fury unleashed by the long-dormant volcano. Thick layers of volcanic ash, which later transformed to lahar, left most of the facilities damaged or half-buried. It was a retreat that the base had to make with sorrow but with optimism. After the base returned to operational status, most of the F-8H aircrafts were severely damaged, while its predecessor, the unquitting robust F-5s, continued to operate. It made its last operational deployment in year 2000 during the military forces operation to capture the Camp Abu Bakar and stop the encroachment of the MILF in central Mindanao. And finally, in 2005, the last F-5 Freedom Fighter aircraft, the country's sole interceptor aircraft, was decommissioned and made the roaring thunders of the jet engines muted. It was also during that year that the Air Defense Command was deactivated, reorganized as Air Defense Wing, and relocated to Basa Air Base. This subsequently followed the downgrading of the 5th Fighter Wing into 5th Tactical Fighter Group. Since then, the Philippine Air Force found itself with no jet combat aircraft. The AS-211 trainer aircraft, the F-5 successor, was re-engineered and converted into a trainer warrior aircraft through the Project Falcon, installing refurbished armaments and optical sight systems extracted from the retired F-5 aircraft. This effort paid off in year 2008 through the Operations Lightning Sword against the MILF breakaway faction, which required airstrikes on enemy troop concentrations and strongholds. For generations that followed, Basa Air Base had been the home of the country's front line of air defense, from the P-51 Mustangs, the T-33 T-Birds, F-86 Delta Saviors, F-86F Saviors, the F-8 Crusaders, the F-5 Freedom Fighters, and the AS-211 Trainer Warriors. For more than 10 years after the decommissioning of the fighter aircraft, downgrading of fighter units, the Philippine sky has never been the same. It has been in silence, left unguarded, and in the absence of a capable fighter aircraft, made the Philippine Air Force powerless to defend the Philippine territorial skies. But with strong conviction, the Flight Plan 2028 was conceptualized to prioritize the modernization of its air assets, base support system, and processes to revitalize a credible first line of air defense. The acquisition of the F-A-50PH aircraft highlights the government's commitment to upgrade its military platforms, modernize the country's armed forces, and strengthen territorial defense and domestic security. And on the second quarter of 2017, the Fighting Eagles made their prowess felt in Marawi City when it thundered during the 5 months combat against the Islamic State-inspired Mauti group. Through the perseverance and determination, the long wait has finally come. On the 13th of June 2017, the rebirth of the 5th Fighter Wing. With this newly acquired fighting aircraft, developing the base into a modern fighter base complex equipped with sprawling jet runway, aircraft movement areas, reconstruction of facilities, and reorganization, this signaled the 5th Fighter Wing is now ready to set forth in rebuilding fighter operations capability towards a credible air defense for peace, freedom, and sovereignty.